I'm the bad guy. I'm the, I'm the
And welcome back to part two of this week's Across the Gridiron. So, Eddie, let's talk about more drama in the NFL. And I use drama loosely because we are trying to hyperbole everything at the moment because it's off season and there's no real drama anywhere. But let's talk about some of the QB stuff that's going on in preseason, specifically with the battle for the starting QBs at both the Cleveland Browns and the New York Giants. So let's start with Cleveland first. Now, we've talked about the Cleveland Browns. They have pretty much four quarterbacks coming into preseason. And everyone thought it was going to be it was likely to be Flacco or Pickett to take the number one spot, but Pickett's now tweaked a hamstring, and now there's a huge battle now between Sanders, Flacco, and Dillon Gabriel. So nobody knows who's it going to be. Again, we talk about a lot of pressure, a lot of spotlight on Sanders, given where he's come from. He's had a pretty strong start to camp by all accounts. Where do you see this one going?
Listen, it's not the Browns have said, listen, hold on, Cowboys, you're not the only ones that need drama. We need to jump in here, and partake in the fun. They started, their NFL season with four quarterbacks. So Joe Flacco was asked to come out, from home, take off his slippers, get his cleats back on, and come back to the Browns. And then they traded for Kenny Pickett. And then draft day, they made sure they entertained the whole world, with drafting Dillon Gabriel and then also Shedeur Sanders. And then, this is really funny to me because the Browns basically declared, during training camp that effectively the starting job was between Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett. And it was going to be between those two, first of all, and then before you even start looking at the rookies. And I know that they did that, almost to sort of quieten the noise about Shedeur Sanders, like just before you guys start building up stories about him not having reps, in training camp and all of that. Let's just tell you that he's not even in the reckoning, right? It's going to be between Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett. And that almost for me is one of those things where, we see it now with Manchester United, where they've got a number of players who apparently they call them the five players who need to leave the club, right? And, the likes of Marcus Rashford, Garnacho and the rest. And the coach was openly very critical about those players last season, right? With the full expectation that they're going to leave the team, right, in the summer. Now, we're kind of getting to the end of the transfer window, and the Premier League season is going to start very soon. And some of those players are still in the squad. How do you go back and then try and reintegrate, those guys into the team? And I feel like when you almost kind of make the statement that they did, with regards to Joe Flacco, who everyone knows that he's on his way out, right? It almost feels like where is the credibility, right? Because more often than not, what's going to happen is he's probably going to start the first couple of games. They're going to lose a couple of games. Then they're going to have to turn, around and look at, the rookies, one of the rookies, and say, oh, well, now, we need you to come in and save our season. And they've not been getting, enough practice, not getting enough reps and all of that. And yes, people might say it's very difficult to give reps to four quarterbacks. But I think it's very, very clear that the quarterbacks that you have on your roster, right? You know Joe Flacco, what he is, what he could be, right? Kenny Pickett, you know what he is, what he could be. This is Kenny Pickett that was at the Steelers, went to the Eagles, didn't even knew he wasn't going to play at all, and now he's at the Browns, right? So why are you not deciding, I want to see what my future looks like with this rookie quarterbacks? And actually, it should really be between the rookie quarterbacks, right? Fighting for a starting job. And then you've got the veterans, to kind of help them, and mold them into what it means to be a quarterback in the league. And I don't think that there's anyone that if the rookies started now, and let's say they didn't start very well, I think you buy yourself a lot of time. You buy yourself great because people expect, hey, they're rookies, right? They're not expected to come in and, absolutely take the league by storm. People expect growing pains from rookies. But now you've given yourself absolutely no out right now. Because with Kenny Pickett being injured, well, we don't know how long his injury is. Hopefully, it's not too long. Now you're almost, declaring Joe Flacco, you're anointing Joe Flacco as the starter, right? So what happens in week 4, week 5 if it doesn't go well? Where do you pivot to? So I think it's really going to be interesting to see how they play the next couple of weeks. Obviously who starts in preseason, with all those quarterbacks, because you see the Browns and say they've got the making of a good team. They've got a good defense, right? And potentially, if they can just decide what we want to do in offense, who's going to lead that offense, they could be in and amongst it, right? I know we discounted them in the division that they're in, when we did the preview last week, and we're kind of like Browns, and that's it.
Yeah, Browns are also there.
They are also there. But it makes for drama, right? It makes for drama, but I wonder whether it's actually necessary drama at all.
Yeah, look, it's a tough one. I think for me, I don't think either Gabriel or Sanders are starting QBs yet,
Mm,
right? Sanders, the fact that they picked Gabriel ahead of Sanders um, shows me that Sanders was almost like the Hollywood headline that they wanted to bring in, and basically just to see what he's like, see what he's got. For me, Flacco is 100% starting week 1, unless he picks up a knock and Pickett is available. Um, I think from what we've read and what we've heard is that Flacco's been getting most of the reps. Sanders is getting more. I think he started getting the lowest number of reps. Now he's not. He's getting a similar sort of rep, but he's only going against the second string defense with the second string O line, right?
mm,
So Gabriel started well. He was accurate, but then apparently over the course of the weekend he was getting more erratic. So I don't. It'll be interesting to see where they go. But the fact that they can default to Flacco, who knows the league, who knows he knows what it takes to be a starting QB, that is where they're going to go. Or Deshaun Watson, who knows? Bring back,
mm. He's
bring him
still
in.
there.
He's
Sometimes
still there collecting
you
his
forget
paycheck.
that he's there.
Well, I mean, it's crazy. They've got 5 QBs. I don't know. I mean, Watson's injured, isn't he? Is that officially he's injured?
Yeah, I mean he's injured, but I mean he's not.
No, but he's apparently still in all the training rooms and in the quarterback room and he's there at training and all sorts. So I mean, I think they've made the drama here, haven't they? They've
Yeah.
got they've got one senior-ish QB, and they've got for some reason they went for 2 rookies to see which one I think is going to be their third string, and then the fourth one is either going to be cut or he's going to be in the practice squad.
Mm,
It's going to be Flacco or Pickett again. It's going to be starting. It's not like what we'll talk about in our when we talk about the Giants in a second, where I think that's a little bit more clear cut. But it's surely going to be Flacco who's going to start. Would you agree?
Um, I think they have no choice. They have no choice but to start Flacco. I think that they've painted themselves in a corner because you've not prepared the rookies, to actually start, right? They've not been getting enough reps. They've not been getting enough, plays and practice and all of that. So you're basically saying, listen, if it doesn't work out, with Joe Flacco, then we've got nothing else. And maybe, like you say, Joe Flacco is experienced in the league. He's gonna be steady. And then, maybe the coach is trying to say, well, look at me, just watch me, go ahead and do something that nobody thinks is possible. But
Mm.
I mean, the Browns is one team, right? There's another team that is absolutely, in the same position, maybe not as bad, and that's the Giants as well. So the Giants have got Russell Wilson, they've all got James Winston and Jaxson Dart as well. And from what people are saying, that Jaxson Dart hasn't really been, pulling up any trees, so far in training camp. And I think Daboll has actually declared, that Russell Wilson is going to be the starter. You know, and that's probably very quick, right? I didn't think that was gonna happen. I thought they might be a little bit more of a, let's see whether between Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, who becomes the starter, a bit like what the Browns are doing. But it just came out and said, hey, it's Russell Wilson as the starter. But it does say a lot about Jackson Dart. And it does go back to the draft. When we talked about, the fallout from the draft, and we talked about all the QBs that were drafted before Shedeur Sanders. Jackson Dart was one of them, as well. So are the Giants sitting down and saying to themselves, we could have had, a quarterback that arguably, as what he's shown in terms of his accuracy so far. And yes, like you say, he's not been playing with the ones, playing with the twos and threes, but it's kind of one of those things that we always talk about in our own sport over here. And it's a conversation that people are having now about Arsenal, right? They've just signed a striker, who's been playing in the Portuguese league, and people are saying, can he come and do it in the Premier League? And then it's almost like, well, if you've got someone that scores goals, right? He knows how to score goals. That is his specialty, right? Then yes, he might not score as many goals, but you would expect him to score goals. You would expect him to score goals if he's got the right system and he's got the right talent behind him. And it's a little bit like that, for me, if someone is showing a degree of accuracy, right, he should continue to show that degree of accuracy, even in the league, because arguably you're playing with better talent, as well, good wide receivers, as well. So it does actually, beg the question, when these teams draft quarterbacks, what are they actually looking at, right? And we keep hearing these stories, how teams, always getting it wrong, with quarterbacks, and it's just interesting. You've got two teams, Browns and Giants, that are almost saying to themselves, we've got it wrong in our quarterback position. The Browns, more about what they've done now to declare who's the starter. And the Giants more like, what did they do in the draft when it came to the quarterback position?
Yeah, I mean, I think for personally, I think for the Giants, it's pretty clear cut, right? And it's exactly what what personally what I've been saying from day one. You draft a quarterback unless you're drafting a pick one, right? One or two overall pick. Beyond that, you've got to give them time to bed in. Now, I actually like what the Giants are doing because they've got two veterans, right? They've got Wilson, who has been a star QB. It's been an elite level QB. At 36, he's probably not there now. And you've got Jameis Winston, who was obviously he was a fairly high pick, wasn't he? For the was it Buccaneers who drafted him? Fairly high pick, never really worked out. But you've got two veteran QBs from Dart to learn off,
Mm,
right? You can go in with there's a lot of pressure. That they're looking at the every day there's the Dart download so you can see what to see so the fans can read what Jackson's out doing. But yeah, you put Wilson as your starting QB. Let him hit neighbors. That's what they should be doing, right?
yeah.
And then and then if Dart needs to come in, he comes in the second string. Winston for me is the obvious sort of third string QB. Or if Wilson goes down
Yeah.
early in the season, then Winston can come in, can probably leapfrog Dart until Dart is ready, because Winston's obviously he can be reliable. From all accounts over the course of the weekend, Winston was working pretty much exclusively with the third string.
Mm,
Right. So that is clearly the route that they're going. There's no there would be more pressure on Dart if you start Dart knowing that you've got Wilson and Winston breathing down his neck. That would put more pressure on him.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
you're right though, because in a funny way, right? Someone could look at these two teams and say, "Well, you're not doing anything different." But I think the difference is the quarterbacks in question, right?
Hmm.
We're talking about Russell Wilson, we're talking about Joe Flacco, we're talking about James Winston, we're talking about Kenny Pickett, and I think that even if you were going to rank, all of these players, you would probably rank Russell Wilson and James Winston before you start to look at Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett. So yeah, you can if you ask the question, which situation would I rather be? Do I want to be the Giants or do I want to be the Browns? I think I want to be the Giants, right? Because I think that I've got a situation there where I've got two players that have been successful in the league, and they can be mentors, to Jaxson Dart. And like you say, Malik Nabers is a stud. He's a wide receiver that would definitely, help any quarterback in that division. And I think the Giants are going to lean on their defense. The defense wasn't that bad last season. And then they've got Abdul Carter, who some people argue is probably one of the best defensive players that came out of the draft, this season or this year. So yeah, definitely want to be the Giants. Don't want to be the Browns. The Browns look a little bit more like a circus show right now.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think the one other key difference between the Giants and the Browns, say, or what have they done different? The key thing for me is the Giants drafted one QB,
Mm,
right? One QB to put like this is going to be our guy in a year or 2 years, and we have two veterans for him to learn from. Where Browns have just got two. You've got two rookies. Which one are they going for? Everyone thought Sanders was going to be the star show of the draft, or one of the star shows of the draft, I should say, not the one. Picked really far down the line, so it's different. And I think one of the biggest news that came out of the Giants after this week is, their wide receiver Bryce Ford Wheaton suffered a torn Achilles, so he'll probably be out for the season, which is a big blow for them. And that's another weapon that these QBs don't potentially have. So that's really unfortunate for them. But yeah, I said I think there's been a bit of drama, and maybe some people were hanging on hope that Jaxson Dart would be the starting quarterback for the Giants. If I was a Giants fan, or if I was speaking to the Giants fan, I would say, look, take it easy, right? Don't put the pressure too much on a rookie QB in season one. Let him learn the league. He's got two great people to learn from. Let him learn from them, and then next season, that's what in his sophomore year, that's when he can go. Everyone's excited by these youngsters who come through and these rookies that come through, but sometimes, especially in QB, give them a chance to breathe, give them a chance to age. So, excellent. Okay, let's call that at the end of part 2, and we'll be back for the final part this week, where we're going to be looking at some other training camp shocks, injuries, breakthroughs, and basically we're just trying to fill another 15 minutes for this week. So we'll see you in part 3.
Thank you for tuning to this episode of Across the Gridiron.
So for more NFL-related news, insights, and somewhat outlandish Cowboys opinion and rants, please leave a comment or hit like and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification button so you never miss a video of any of our nonsense.
And we'll be back soon at Across the Gridiron.
I'm the bad